Chapter 6. 2 months previously. Blaine. Blaine stared at the cabin in front of him and sighed. He didn't want to be here. He'd never wanted to come back. But the cabin had been left to him. He still didn't understand why his uncle willed it to him instead of his parents. And while he could have refused it, he felt that would be a slap to his family. This was his responsibility now, and he could figure out what to do. And even though it was painful, maybe it was time, too. He sucked in a deep breath and inserted the key in the lock. He'd never been entrusted with the key before. The last time they had been here, he'd been only 10, and his parents hadn't trusted him with the key. Odd how they'd trusted him to look after his brother, but not with the small metal object. The door creaked open, and the musty smell of unopened rooms wafted out. Had anyone used this cabin since that winter? His family certainly hadn't been back, but his uncle had kids. Had they avoided it as well? He stepped into the living room and tried not to get sucked into the memories. The blue checkered couch was exactly as he remembered it, if not a little more worn and faded. That had been his favorite place to curl up when the fire was burning brightly in the large brick fireplace. The other couch, his place, also looked the same. And he could imagine him there, asking questions, hanging upside down, eating popsicles, and getting messy and sticky, like always. Blaine crossed to the windows and lifted them open. He didn't plan to stay long, but the musty smell was overpowering, and the fresh air would help alleviate it. As he opened the window, a memory of it breaking filled his mind. He and Kevin had been playing baseball out front, and a wild tip had sent the ball careening into the window, shattering it completely. Not only had they gotten in trouble, but they'd had to pick up all the pieces of glass and replace it with their own money. That had been the last summer they played ball near the cabin. Ironically, it had been the last summer they'd visited the cabin. The memories had been locked away so deep down for so long, only coming out in self-loathing and bad decisions. But being here, in this place where his presence was strongest, was bringing them all back, and it was rough. He'd even been dreaming about it again. Blaine continued through the house, opening windows and checking for mice. Luckily, the cabin had remained almost preserved, like a mausoleum, and he found no traces of rodents. It did have a copious amount of dust covering almost every surface, and much of it was old and outdated. He would probably have to hire a designer to update it before he could sell it. He didn't really have time to be hunting for a designer, not with summer practice starting soon. But at least once the deed was done, he could get rid of the cabin. Maybe then the memories would disappear with it. Kenzi. At the buzzing in her pocket, Kenzi set down her lunch and pulled out her phone. She tapped at the app and stared in disbelief at her email. The top one was from the Texas tornadoes. But why would they be emailing her? Shelby was the center manager. She bit her lip and opened the email. Her eyes scanned the words, skimming over them and barely registering their significance until she got to the end. Oh my gosh! What? Her voice must have startled Shelby as the hand holding her drink jumped and liquid flew out of her cup, spilling the contents down her hand and onto the floor. Darn it. She set her cup down and stood to grab paper towels from the dispenser, but Kenzi barely looked up as Shelby began mopping up her mess. I just got an email from the Texas tornadoes. They want to hire me to redecorate the center and update it. She could not believe it. She was still finishing her degree at the college and hadn't even thought of putting out feelers for jobs yet. They said they loved what I did for the Christmas party and want to do something special for the kids. They want me to do the whole center, and they're going to pay for it all, and pay me on top of it. Shelby tossed the paper towels in the nearby trash can and returned to her seat. I knew it. I told you decorating was your thing. Now you have a job, and I'm sure more will come. In fact, I think we need to get you business cards so you can start handing them out. Kenzi shook her head as she packed up her food. Lunch had felt too short, but that didn't dim her excitement. Business cards would be silly right now. I don't even have my degree yet. But you will, and you want to be prepared when you do. Besides, it's my gift to you, and I refused to take no for an answer. Shelby wadded up the rest of her trash and carried it to the dispenser. Kenzi laughed at her best friend's insistence. She wasn't sure who was more excited at this point, her or Shelby. Okay, but can I have something fun and not just boring white? Of course. I was thinking something pink and glittery. Kenzi chuckled as she followed Shelby out of the small break room. Do they even make pink and glittery business cards? Shelby glanced down at her watch. I don't know, but we have a few minutes. We could jump online and check. Let's do it. Kenzi had no idea what this might mean for her future, but it definitely felt like a sign.